Hi folks, welcome to this bite-sized PD edition brought to you on YouTube Live. Here we're going to look at the Durham District School Board's technology approval process, otherwise known as TAP. My name is John Edwards and I'm a member of the Innovative Education Department as a technology facilitator, and I'm here with Mike Vukas, who is the database administrator and the architect of our wonderful new TAP process. So without further ado, let's begin and take a look at the technology approval process within the Durham District School Board. All right, to start with, in order to get to the technology approval process, I'm going to start here on teacher.ddsb.ca. So this is the teacher landing page. And you notice on the teacher landing page, there's a link here to the Tech Help portal. As I click on the Tech Help portal, this is going to take us to, perhaps not surprisingly, the Tech Help portal. And in here, you can see that there's a link to approved technologies, okay? But before I go much further, I want to make it clear that this is an opportunity to be an interactive YouTube Live session. So you may wish to participate in chat. If you're looking to participate in chat, which is something we certainly encourage you to do, you can see that in a bite-sized PD session on the right-hand side, there is an option to chat. You will have to sign in with your DDSB credentials in order to do that, right? So once you're signed in with your username at ddsb.ca, you will be able to chat. What you will see, however, is that you will have to, up at the top here, you'll have to click on your username's icon, right? So that looks like this. You'll click on that icon, and then from there, you will click on underneath that icon there with your username, you'll click on My Channel. It's then going to ask you to create the channel. Don't worry, you're not creating a new channel, you're just verifying one that already exists. This is a one-time procedure, and this will allow you to participate in YouTube Live chats, okay? And one further thing to identify for you as well is that we have at the bottom of the stream itself, you'll see in the description, there is a link to a questionnaire. It's a Google form. So if you have any questions that don't get addressed within this this bite-sized PD session, or if you have any suggestions for how we can improve the technology approval process, please share that with us. And what we'll do following this session, once we're able to compile some of the information and questions, is we're going to produce an FAQ for you that hopefully address issues that don't get looked at and discussed within this short session, which will be about 10 to 15 minutes in length. Okay, so without further ado then, we're looking at the Tech Help portal. I click on Approved Technologies. Okay. So under Approved Technologies, first thing to note here is that you'll see that there's a menu bar here that lists software, hardware, and my requests, okay? So this is searchable. So if I click under software, first thing you'll see here is a list of software. I can scroll down and see this noted alphabetically. I can also search for a particular piece of software. You also see that some of the software will have this parent consent required next to it, okay? What that means is that the piece of software requires parental approval before you can use it within the classroom, okay? So let's take an example of this. I'll just click on this first one that comes up here. You'll see here the technology requires parent-guardian consent before being used in the classroom. If I click on the consent form, we'll see that the consent form is a PDF, and it asks for specific pieces of information. You can, and I would encourage you to do this, to list within your classroom all of the technologies that you're going to be using, right? So you can list those technologies so parents can review that with an explanation of how those tools will be used within your programming and the curriculum connections, as well as some links to the vendor's website or websites so people can follow up, parents can follow up on some specifics, and of course they can contact you if they have further questions. Right, so anything on here that gets flagged with a parent consent form, it means that you need to have this. So this involves basically anything that where student data is being used, right? So anything where student data is being uploaded to a third-party service, that requires parental consent. Other pieces of software where student data is being used but are hosted on DDSB servers where parent consent is not required are the core DDSB technologies. So here we're looking at Google G Suite, right? So this is your Google Classroom, Google Drive, for example. We also have D2L, which is the Ministry Learning Management System. We have Moodle, and we have Office 365 and OneDrive, okay? So those core pieces of technology do not require parent consent. Anything else where student data is being used does require that consent. Okay, so if I'm looking here as well, there's a legend. So this identifies low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. So some of the particular pieces of software that are flagged as moderate or high risk, they might be software where it's there's potential for student data to be uploaded to that third-party service, depending on how the teacher inputs or uses that particular piece of software. So it could be a case where somebody's using, say, Kahoot or something like that, and instead of using the first initial for a student, they may put their first and last name. So what we would certainly recommend is that in those cases, do not provide the full name, first and last name of the student. Just use their initials so you can keep the anonymity there. So that's one of the examples where we might have a higher risk for a piece of software that gets flagged here. Okay. We also have software that has been grandfathered by our security team. Okay, so I can easily search for, again, a piece of software. You can see if I'm looking for turnitin.com, I can see that come up here, and I can click on that, and I can see how it's approved and the specifics here in terms of the parent guardian consent being required for use. Okay, and it also provides some information on that, and again, the links to the consent form. Okay, so that's the software side of things. We also have in here, of course, the ability to search for hardware, right? So we can search for hardware, and we can see, again, that's flagged in a similar way through the use of the legend, and we can search for that. If you have submitted requests, all of your requests are located here under My Requests, right? So you can see that I, for example, submitted a request for Nearpod, and that request was completed, right? So it's at 100%, right? And once it has been completed, which it has been, I received an email in my Outlook identifying me of that and any next steps that would be required. In this case, no next steps, it's ready to go. I also submitted a request here for the big blue button, right? You can see that right now, this is at stage 1 under safety and security. So it's being reviewed by our security analyst. It's at 25%, okay? When we sort of talk about 25%, 100% and the sort of processes here, this is basically a rough map of what that looks like. When a request gets submitted by a user, it goes to the manager or principal for approval, okay? Something to keep in mind here, if you are going to be submitting something for approval, you should have a conversation with your principal or manager so they know that you're requesting something. You could talk to them about what it is you're requesting and why. So when they receive that email indicating that that one of their employees has submitted something for approval, they have an idea of what that is and why it's being requested. Okay. From there, it proceeds through several different stages. Some of these, of course, aren't going to be relevant for specific pieces of software or hardware, but it does have to make sure it clears any considerations for health and safety. Of course, security, where we look at privacy-related issues and the terms of use. Innovative education or student achievement, where we look for curriculum connections, and if there's similar pieces of software, for example, that already meet those needs. The user experience team that would have to look at issues like how that software or hardware can be deployed within the classroom, within our enterprise environment. Purchasing where required, and of course, then it would end up under the approved technologies list, where you will see that listed here, which will be searchable. Right now, it could be the case as well that for particular requests, you may want to find out some additional information where it sort of is within the request. I can click here on this, the main page here. And as I click on that, we can see sort of a searchable list. This is the so-called Tab Console. And I can see the individual pieces of technology, and I can sort of see where they're at within the process. So here, for example, the Apple TV 4th generation is at 60% complete. The user experience team right now is testing for deployability and compatibility of this technology. And we can see with other pieces of hardware, software that perhaps are not as far along. We can see the big blue button here that I requested where that is. And yeah, I can also, of course, filter this so we can look at just the technology pieces that have been completed, right? So that's under the Tab Console. A few other things to keep in mind here, and then before I show you what it looks like to submit a new request, is there's a disclaimer here that technology usually requires up to 3 months to complete the review process. So bear that in mind when you submit something, that there are a number of steps that need to be completed before we can give something the go-ahead. In some cases, some additional information may be required. Once the request is approved, you may be required to submit a help ticket for the technology to be installed, depending on how it's deployed. Some software, of course, needs to be installed through a LAN administrator. Other software could be something that you may access through a website. So we need to take a look at that. Okay. In some cases, it may take longer than the 3 months to approve the software. In that case, the requester will be notified. All right, so finally here, as I look under the new request, if I'm looking to submit something, I would click on a new request. In here, we can see that there are several required fields, right? So if I'm identifying if it's software or hardware. In some cases, it's a combination of software and hardware. It could be a hardware piece that requires particular software to make it run. The technology type, if it's educational technology, assistive, or a business utility. The version, in some cases, somebody may request not the latest version of a particular piece of software. The URL, so we know how we can specifically find that particular software for testing purposes and for security vetting. The title of the software or hardware. Here, you would not want to say something like, I would like to use Kahoot in my classroom. Instead, you would put Kahoot if that's what you're looking to get approved, right? So make it as specific as possible. You'd outline the purpose of this. And again, this is helpful for the various stages of the technology approval process, for security, for innovative education, for your principal or manager, so they know exactly what you're looking for and why you're looking to have that approved, right? So the more sort of specificity you can provide in there can be helpful. And two last things, we have the platform. So if it's something for Windows, if it's a web-based resource or something in for Chrome, that can be identified, as well as special flags here for special education, Windows 10 compatible, or for administrators. Okay. So with that said, just wondering if Mike, you have anything else that you wanted to add, anything?
Not at this time, John. That was pretty much everything.
Okay, that's wonderful. All right, so I'm going to go back to the screen here. All right, so again, that's a quick bite-sized PD version of the Durham District School Board approved technologies, or the technology approval process. I hope you found that this was helpful. Again, there's a link in the description to some feedback. So if you have feedback on what you think ought to change within the technology approval process, we can certainly take a look at that. If you have some questions, issues that weren't addressed within this very bite-sized PD, please feel free to do that, and we will be putting out an FAQ. If you have other questions about how to use technology within your class, within your programming, you can email any of the innovative education facilitators or our general inbox at innovative.education@ddsb.ca. And of course, if you have technological issues that need to be looked at, or troubleshooting to take place, you can submit a help ticket. Okay, thank you very much for watching this bite-sized PD on YouTube Live.